Is radio ready for the future? DTS AutoStage is revolutionizing the radio experience in the car, rising to meet user expectations. DTS AutoStage helps build trust and engagement. We do it by giving today's smart listeners an enhanced in-car radio experience that preserves radio's competitive advantage. Its focus on communities. With DTS AutoStage, radio never looked so good because we delight listeners with features like market at a glance information, a visually rich modern display with accurate metadata, lyrics in the car, links to artist events, and interactivity. And we do this at scale, around the world. In the studio, DTS AutoStage's broadcaster portal gives station managers and program directors editorial control and access to actionable data and answers to critical questions about the audience, like when are they listening? What are they listening to? Where are the listeners located when tuning into your station? Our innovative analytics never leave you guessing. In a world dominated by digital chaos and big tech apps, we simplify, connect, and innovate to make life easier for you and your listeners. Get connected today with DTS AutoStage.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this first day of Radio Week 2024. Delighted to have everybody watching. It's amazing, some of the places that people are tuning in from: Namibia, from France, from the US, from Canada, different time zones, Pakistan, Portugal, Malaysia, the Netherlands. Delighted to have all of you here for this kickoff day of Radio Week 2024. Now, we were watching that video, and I was remembering that maybe just a few years ago, we would have all been, radio people would have been watching with trepidation as these screens got bigger. And there was this idea that perhaps the car radio was going to become irrelevant. Well, that isn't the case. You've just seen that perhaps there is hope after all. And that's why we've put this panel together, courtesy of Xperi. Joe D'Angelo is the Senior Vice President of Broadcast for Radio and Audio Global for Xperi Incorporated. Jim Receveur is CEO of Bauer Media Denmark and Norway. He's a user, so he's got experience. Reggie Shah is from the US, Senior Director of Research and Insights at Odyssey. It's a fantastic panel. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today to take us through how technology has shifted in the car. Joe, perhaps let's start with you and understand why the motor vehicle became such a focal area for advances in tech. Why did that happen?
Thanks, Omar, and welcome everyone. Jim and Reggie, thanks for joining us today. I think if you look at the innovation in the car, and we can probably pull up the slides now, what's really driving it is the intersection of technology, connectivity, and content. So the next slide, please. And there you see it. Those are probably the driving forces behind the evolution of the in-car media experience. And we really need to think of it as a media experience because it's going far beyond just audio. Let's go to the next one. We all remember the early days of connected services in the car where it was simply IP mirroring of your smartphone, and you had a really crude presentation of additional IP audio services. If you go to the next slide, you'll see how these are evolving. The availability and accessibility of IP audio services has become much more integrated with the user experience in the dash. As you said, as those screens are getting larger, it's becoming easier and more, the IP services are more available. Let's go to the next one. Here you actually see a bespoke IP audio service where a car company has decided to curate their own audio service. It's a white labeled service, but This is not radio. This is not Pandora. This is not Spotify. This is a bespoke audio service for this OEM. And a lot of the automakers, as the screens are expanding and connectivity is expanding, they're trying to really ascertain what is their position in the media landscape in the car, and how can they curate, control, and exploit that user experience. So this is just a glimpse into audio, but it's not only audio. If we go to the next slide, you'll see video is coming into the car. Now, this is a Tesla, which tends to be at the leading edge of all media integration in the vehicle and connected services. But Tesla is not alone. If you go to the next one, you'll see Mercedes. Mercedes has launched video in the car, and they did it actually last year at CES. I recently attended CES 2024, and these trends are accelerating. So you're going to see more and more media content coming into the dash, more and more integrated into not only the user interface in the car, but they're harmonized with the operations of the vehicle. So these media services, as they become more engaging, are obviously a little bit more distracting, but that is being offset by some of the ADAS and driver assistance systems. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that Mercedes is not alone. In fact, BMW launched video services supported by Xperi with DTS AutoStage, powered by TiVo. We launched this at IFA in 23. We showed it again at IBC, and this capability is now rolled out into multiple countries across Europe, Asia, and most recently in the US. And this is available now in multiple models of BMWs. So next slide, please. So you've got audio services that are expanding, video services that are coming into the car, and gaming is actually not very far behind at all. Here again, you see Tesla kind of leading the charge with their integration of gaming. But while they're first, they're not alone. The next slide, you'll see the integration of gaming with BMW. And there's different categories of gaming that are evolving, which is interesting. There are actually games that are safe to play while you're driving. Think of things like Name That Tune or What's the Next Lyric. They're driver-centric games, all the way to games like this, which are typically called console games, which really replicate the in-home user experience. But the car is more and more becoming that, third or fourth space for people to engage with media and entertainment. Let's go to the next one, please. So against this backdrop of connectivity, technology, and content, how can radio compete? I think from our perspective, and we really designed AutoStage to be the platform, the ecosystem that allows broadcasters to really lean in, exploit these opportunities, but own the user experience. It's very unique in that most other technology platforms disintermediate the broadcasters from one or more aspect of that user experience. Either they are not in complete control of the content and the metadata and the visual displays, or they're not able to see the data and analytics. In our case, and you'll see with AutoStage, all of that is in the control of the broadcaster. So I would encourage broadcasters on the call to not be afraid of what's happening in the vehicle, but lean in and own the audio experience.
Joe, just to interrupt very briefly to say that those who are watching, I didn't say to you at the beginning that you can ask questions all the time. So wherever you are in the world, if this is your first exposure to the technology that's changing the motor vehicle, changing audio and radio in the car, please feel free to put your questions through. There's a comment section. Say who you are or remain anonymous if you want to. Remember, this is not an advertorial. This is really for you. It's an information session. You can ask any question. Nothing is off limits. So feel free to push your questions through all the time, and whoever is the expert among the panel will answer it. Thanks, Joe. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, Omar. We're wide open to any questions because I know this space is evolving and changing very quickly. But broadcasters do have a unique opportunity to continue to own the audio experience, starting with broadcast, extending into IP. You can absolutely extend your content offerings to on-demand audio. Absolutely, there are opportunities to leverage these adjacent technologies. We're working with many broadcasters to bring their video content from the studio into this user experience, as well as some of the gaming. There's a number of broadcasters around the world that have produced and managed their own gaming platforms. You see a lot of it online. That can also come into the car, and you can control that user experience. And probably most importantly, and it's going to be the bulk of this conversation, is leveraging the technology and connectivity of the vehicle to understand your broadcast audience, to truly understand where, when, how, and what they're listening to. So let's go to the next slide. And this is all enabled through DTS AutoStage. DTS AutoStage is a global platform that was developed by Xperi, launched in 2020. It is free and open to all broadcasters, and you'll see the rich analytics and the amazing user experience that it powers. Our first customer was Mercedes. We launched in 2020. Next slide, please. So here you can see an evolution of that rollout. Started in 2020. We had 3 models of Mercedes in 2021. 2022, we launched with Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, Tesla, up to 52 models, and these were global over-the-air updates as well as new vehicle productions. We are now at the beginning of 23. We had 3 additional brands in development, but if you advance the slide, 23 you'll see was an incredibly productive year. We added 4 additional brands in production. These are available around the world at dealerships. We have 2 more brands that are in our final certification process and will launch before Radio Days Europe. And then we have 6 additional brands, bringing the count up to 18, who will launch before the end of the calendar year. So unlike traditional rollouts of both HD radio and DAB that took years to hit scale, AutoStage is rolling out at a much, much more rapid pace, and in many cases is being applied as a software upgrade to vehicles that were launched as early as 2016. So let's take a look on the next slide at what some of these implementations look like. What's unique about AutoStage is it allows the broadcaster and the automaker to retain creative control over the layout and presentation of content. You'll see as we go through these examples, the user interfaces are very different, which is different from what you would see with CarPlay and Android for Auto, where the user interfaces for apps are very, very kind of consistent and cookie cutter. There's not a lot of differentiation. So we were very excited to see Tesla launch because Tesla's position on radio has been a subject of a lot of debate. But when they launched with our system, you could see they're investing in making the radio experience easier for their drivers and much more engaging. Next slide, please. Here you see the implementation of a Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis. Same manufacturer, different vehicle models, different radio interfaces, different radio platforms, but you can see the consistent presentation of radio, the engaging visuals while you're listening to the station, and the much, much easier discovery with the multimedia interactive list. Next slide, please. Most recently, we launched with Lincoln. Here you can see a pillar-to-pillar visual display, and radio is very prominent in both the center stack and in the display in front of the passenger. Next one, please. And at CES, we launched with Nissan and Infiniti, our most recent partner. Here you can see their interface. And I think on the next slide, we may have, here's our video service. I mentioned this earlier. This was also on display at CES, where we launched video with BMW, which is available, around the world in multiple countries. So you can see the active role that Xperi is playing and how AutoStage is really developing and delivering a rich multimedia, very powerful platform for car companies and content producers. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier, and you saw it in the video, that this is a global platform, and that's true. This is the only global connected radio platform in existence. We have right now about 6 million cars deployed around the world, supporting over 94,000 radio stations. And what's important, just to set the stage as we get into the second half of this discussion, is these number of hours of listening and the program events. The program events are basically the lifeblood of our measurement system. Every time we deliver information about a radio station or about radio station programming to a vehicle, we measure that. And because we measure that, we're able to build a profile, a picture of how your audience is engaging with your station. So as we scale the number of cars, the number of radio stations, the granularity of the insights is increasing exponentially. And you're going to see that number, 25 billion, probably increase tenfold by the end of the year. So think about that as really the foundation for the insights that we're going to deliver to you. Again, all free of charge. So next slide. And what's also unique about this, not only are we the only global system, we're the only patent protected connected radio platform. And that's very important because in today's complex digital services environment, there is intellectual property around so many platforms, so many services around the world that you, both as a broadcaster and as an automaker, take significant risk when you innovate without IP protection. We provide that IP protection both to the broadcasters and to the automakers, so you can safely deploy this system and you can safely participate in it, knowing that you have, the indemnification and protection of Xperi. Let's move to the next slide, please. Now, this is really, I think, why you all joined, to understand the so what. What do you get out of the participation in this platform? Not only great discovery of your radio stations, rich engagement, a competitive alternative to the other media platforms, but you'll get to know the story of your station and how you're engaging with the audience. Next slide. Again, this slide is a heat map of all of our connected cars around the world. So what you're seeing is basically a heat map that shows the concentration of vehicles around the world that are connected with our system, that are listening to radio, and that have an enhanced radio experience as we're delivering your metadata, your station information into this platform. Next slide, please. Like any good story, our analytics are going to tell you who was listening, not precisely the individual, but the vehicles and where they are, where they're listening, when they listened, how they listened. Were they listening to analog, DAB, HD radio, a translator, a repeater, and what programming is most engaging, how your audience is reacting to your programming. So let's go to the next one. Now I'd like to kind of introduce what we call the DTS Broadcaster Portal. This is the beginning or the launch point for where broadcasters grab control and begin to understand their audience. For every broadcast group that signs on to the platform, you are provided access to this portal, and your organization, all the stations within your organization are presented here. So I'd like to invite Reggie just to comment a little bit about this platform and the value of having a consolidated view to manage all of your stations.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Reggie, for kicking this off.
Sure. I love this, the actual screen that you just showed. I'll comment. The first thing I'll say is when you look at the bottom of this page, I think it's cut off right now, but you'll see it said, yeah, there it is. Country 94.7. So something that really stands out for me in research and insights is the fact that we can see data deeper for an HD2 station, right? That's something where our currency measurement partners don't do very well because their panel size is limited. So we can utilize this this system right here to show our listenership in those stations and how it fluctuates. Where again, some of the currency measurement, you really can't see much detail.
Yeah, I think that's true. As the industry globally has embraced digital broadcasting, whether it's DAB or HD radio, getting accurate understanding of the audience and how they're engaging with the new technologies has been a bit of a challenge. And it also comes at a reasonable expense. If you want to measure it, you're going to have to pay for it. And this gives you some definitely some basic insights into all your systems. If we go to the next slide, we can bring Jim into the conversation because you'll see a similar screen for Bauer. And Bauer, has a very different deployment than Odyssey. I think radio in Europe is generally managed much differently. You have national, regional stations. So can we go to the next slide, please? There you go. So Jim, I think I tried to get as many local stations that you're responsible as I could on this list. The challenge with Bauer is you have so many stations in so many countries.
You've got some in Norway and some in Denmark, but lucky enough I covered both, so I'm all right. So, yeah.
So are you seeing value in just this basic presentation of the content and your stations as kind of a quick check on how things are integrated with AutoStage?
Yeah, it's in Norway and Denmark though. We've been having PPM for some time, and PPM is an instant meter that we can see our listeners. The challenge with our PPM is we can't really see where they're listening in the car. We can just see that they're listening. We can see their age group. We can say how old they are. We can use a lot of information, but we can see that there's changes where people want to buy advertisers are just in the car. One of our biggest target groups is 15 to 50 in the car listening. And what this does is also gives us an opportunity to cross-reference that and saying, okay, who's actually using the car, and cross-reference with the PPM, and it gives us a clearer and deeper view. It was difficult for us when we started PPM. We went crazy when we first got PPM, which is people meter. People don't know it's a meter that people wear as a watch, and it gives me the listeners every minute. And what it was doing though is that we were looking at our playlist and saying, okay, we went down that minute with that song. And everybody went absolutely insane trying to figure out how can we monitor this. Then we also said that, okay, every time there was a news bulletin going on, people would actually go away. But then we found out it wasn't the news. It was a question. It was the top of the hour, and people had to go to meetings. So crossing the PPM over with the data that you're bringing is a good way to double check and go deeper.
So Jim, can you give it your programmers? What are they doing? Have they tweaked their programming strategy or tactics as a result of the data that's coming in, that they're seeing how people respond in the cars? Because I mean, car listening, morning and afternoon drive is crucial and the most valuable.
Yeah. It was actually interesting. We were talking about this just the other day, where probably most people on this call don't know, and probably will still be shocked to know that Norway was the only country in the world that has shut off FM and put on DAB. They did this in 2018. In 2018, when they shut off DAB, there was 2 public radio stations and 2 commercial stations that were national. So there's 4 national radio stations in 2018. They got shut off, and today there is 36 national radio stations on DAB. But if you look 5 years later and look at the station profiles right now, the same 3 stations that were on FM in 2016 are the same 3 stations out of 36 now that are the number 1 stations on DAB. So so what we're looking at is, I don't think you should be afraid of what's coming up with the mobile, but and on in the car. But I would highly recommend that you don't forget your golden goose, because if you it doesn't matter how many stations are going to come out there. If you've got a number one station right there, you've got to. So we've done a lot to make sure we invest in our others to make sure our top brands stay the top brands, and that's going to be even more crucial, I believe, in the coming years on auto.
But what about what? Okay, let's carry on and finish the presentation, because I do want to get back to those questions, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions emerging from those who are watching as well. We really want you to participate, because we're thinking about a couple of things, but you might have 16 other things that you're interested in that nobody's talking about right here in the panel. So feel free to send your questions through. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, and let's take a look at what this user experience looks like on actual two of the stations. One from Odyssey and one from Bauer. So if we go to the next slide, you see what the user experience for broadcast radio looks like today. It's actually, I think, fairly amazing, very impactful, and has the look and feel of any modern digital audio experience. What you're seeing here is actually broadcast radio for two stations. Reggie, give us a little background on 102.7. I believe that's in New York, right?
Yep, 102.7 is our hot AC station in New York. And I mean, as you could see, I mean, it looks sexy. Look at that. Like that's the look that we want to have for the station. It's fresh. It really represents broadcast radio today. It's not it's not a frequency, right? This is what our station looks like and sounds like.
Yeah. And Jim, what about Nova? That's one of your stations I grabbed. Is that a national station?
Yeah, it's a national station. It's the number one station in Denmark right now, and it's a CHR station. And I'll say the same as Reggie. I think it has a good look, a good feel. It's got the black and white, the colors. I think it looks like a future radio station and not a FM 97.2 radio station. It looks like it's ready for the future.
Yeah, and I think that's really one of the objectives we were striving towards when we were curating all the content and working with OEMs to lay out the user interface, was how can we level the playing field? That's really what we wanted to do in this platform, is provide broadcast radio a competitive advantage to the pure, digital services, while still embracing everything that broadcast had to offer. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see, and I'll just walk through these next 5 pretty quickly, because then we're going to get into the meat of the analytics. When we talk about giving broadcasters control and visibility into every aspect of the system, this is really how they do it. In the broadcaster portal, you as a broadcaster have access to all the station information. And these are the 2 screens that both Odyssey and Bauer would use to manage the presentation of the station. You can see all the static information over here on this side of the screen. If you go to the next slide, sorry. The static information, that's all in the control of the broadcaster. They can go in and edit, change it. If you flip formats, if you do a seasonal logo, all of that can be changed, and it flows through our system in 90 seconds. So any modifications, and in many cases with broadcasters, we've automated these interfaces, where if you have a central content management system, it can integrate directly into AutoStage. And as soon as you make those updates in the system, they flow through into our system and get pushed out to all the cars on the road. Next slide, please. You also get a small preview here of what's now playing on the radio. So you can see at any point in time what content is flowing through our system and being displayed on the radios. Next one, please. You also get a preview of the analytics. So this is just a little bit of a tease where we give you a glimpse into the last 7 days of how the station is performing in its market. But if you go to the next slide, you see the View Analytics tab. And when you click on that, and go to the next slide, you'll see where the analytics really explode. And across the top, you'll see 4 tabs: station reach, day part activity, heat map, and top charts. And that's the first generation of analytics that we are making available. What you see here with station reach is we actually look at the market for this station. So in the case of Nova, it's a national format. In the case of WNEW, it's a local format within the New York market. We define the market and we look at all the vehicles that are enabled with DTS AutoStage and what their listening behavior has been over, basically we measure this every day, but what we're showing here is how Nova is performing against all the radio listening going on in all the DTS AutoStage equipped vehicles in Denmark. I believe this is in Denmark. And we're showing you the reach, like how is this station performing? And on average, you're seeing they have about 7% of all radio listening is being done to this station. I do want to be very specific, though. Unlike the PPM, which is been designed and distributed to be a statistical representation of the audience, what we're showing here is actual radio listening. However, it's only in the cars that have DTS AutoStage. So it is a subset of the audience. At this point, given the 10 brands or so that we've launched with, I would say it probably doesn't statistically represent your audience as PPM would. But I still believe this is very valuable information, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. So with that kind of setup, I'd like to open it up to Jim and Omar to dig into it in a little more detail.
Yeah, in fact, I'd like the audiences who are watching that don't have this technology yet in their market to come in and for us to understand why not. Because as you've said a couple of times now, this is free to the broadcaster. So there's value add that's coming in as a result of this technology that will give programmers and sales teams insights that they never had before. The car was a mystery. You knew people sat in it, you knew they drove, but now I really am particularly entranced by, for example, the heat maps. Reggie, I want to go to you about what the heat maps might have helped in your commercialization, how that helps your sales teams. Now that they know the route that people are taking, where they cluster, how has that worked for you? What's it done?
The heat map was really the first thing that we got value out of this immediately with that. Looking at specific markets and stations where we needed to tell the story about our listenership, maybe outside of our market, or where our currency measurement partners don't define as the market, but we still get listening. For example, one of them was a beach town, right, that would not pop up in PPM. But on our national holidays over the summer, I was able to show that we had listenership in those beach towns, which is outside of our traditional coverage area. But the heat map showed a significant amount of listening there, right, which helped me tell the story that you're getting way more listeners than you think you are. We've got coverage and reach in there.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because all of us, that have licenses to broadcast, we have a circumscribed footprint, and we sort of take that as gospel. And like you've just said, there are listeners that move about, and you might find they cluster in particular areas seasonally. You've never been able to take advantage of local advertising in that particular area. This now helps you go to that area and say, well, why aren't you talking to these people? They're all there. They listen to our radio station, and you've never bought here. So I think that's pretty powerful. And I don't know if we have an example of that somewhere about how these heat maps work.
Yeah, if we flip to slide 40, we can bounce around these analytics a little bit, and there you see the heat map for WNEW in New York.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, look at that. You see, you've got some red in the outskirts of what seems to be the main signal, right? Which is not even one person. That's a cluster, right?
Yes.
That's significant.
Yeah, that's the point that we needed to make, is that you're seeing clusters of audiences activated or acting in a particular area that you would otherwise have thought is outside your footprint. And now you can take advantage of that, both from a marketing point. It's not just for sales, but also time to start to say, hey, we've never thought about that area as a place we should grow audiences. But actually, look at that, we can. So it could help marketing strategy.
And to Joe's point before, yes, this doesn't represent the entire market of listening, but this helps me tell the story. Mm-hmm. Right, I build a story out of this, and I'll speak to a prospective client about our listenership and how it's in those areas.
Yeah, Jim, from a programming perspective, or even not even just limited to programming, just some insights about how your teams, as a result of all this data coming through, how they've adjusted, evolved their conversations with whether it's clients or whether with your DJs, with your on-air talent. Have you seen an influence on that because of data that you're getting that previously you wouldn't have been privy to?
Yeah, there's a couple things. One is when you look at the heat map there, if I just touch upon that, it's nice, especially Denmark has a lot of summer areas where there's a lot of summer cottages where people travel. So it's nice to see on holidays and areas how people are moving around. And that gives us a good insight that we can use either next year or the time after or other holiday periods. So I think they're super cool and easy to use. And as Reggie says, it's a great story. It makes sense. It's everybody looks at it and loves colors. I just have to explain the data behind it. So it works really, really well. In reference to programming on the side, I'm really sort of excited on hopefully how the car listening is going to bring, I think, some of the young people back. The one thing that as I mentioned before, I'm not worried about I should even say the 30 plus, because I have some strong brands and I've just got to make sure that they stay there. What I'm worried about is the young. And if I can do some of the things that some Joe spoke about earlier, if I can get, I don't know a teenager in the world that doesn't want to be driven to a party. And if I could get them to sing a song together with me on the same lyrics, at least introduce them into the radio station. Or if I can get them to play a game that they think is fun using some of their music, I'm bringing them to the radio, but not through a traditional radio way. I've got to bring them because I don't really care how I get them there. I just want to get them to my dashboard, and then I can bring them over to the radio after. So I think it's giving also a lot of opportunity to go after a younger age group.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Just a quick anecdote. I don't think I've ever had lyrics from a Michael Jackson song right when I've sung it. And it's resulted in a lot of humor and amusement for my daughters. Now I'm going to get it right. Question, this one's for you, Joe, from Jose Loureiro in Portugal. What level of development is needed from the broadcaster side? Important question, I think, because everybody's saying, well, you're getting it free, but maybe there's a big investment I've got to make on the back end. What is it?
Yeah, actually, thank you for the question. And it's very easy for broadcasters to integrate with our system. We have worked with all the major playout systems, playout vendors, RCS, Zeta, for example, to take live feeds out of their systems and integrate them directly with DTS AutoStage. If you happen to have your own custom CMS system, content management platform, which groups like Odyssey and Hubbard and Bauer, they have their own systems as well as those automation systems. We provide a very basic API and a technical support team that will enable you to integrate with the platform, very, very simply. It usually takes about 2 days of effort. First step is to make sure all of your stations are represented in our system. And then we create the matching where we match the radio station to the live data feed that you deliver. But we have a dedicated team in Europe that helps with that. And again, there's no cost. For those who are wondering on the call, we make our money from the car companies. The car companies pay us basically a one-time fee for access to the API that's delivering all this data into the system. Omar, if we could, I'd just like to walk back through a couple of the analytics because I think they're would help with some context. If we could bounce back to slide 35. I want to go back and show the day part activity. And this one, so what you're seeing here, and I'll have Jim comment on this. This is a graph. It's a visualization of your audience flow for the radio station on any given day. And in this case, I selected New Year's Day because I knew it would be a very different listening pattern than the norm for the radio station. So what you see here are two graphs on the chart. The orange chart represents the day that's selected, so New Year's Day, January 1st. The gray in the background is the average of every Monday for that radio station in our system. And just look at how different the listening pattern is. Not surprisingly, you had a bunch of Danes that were driving around listening to Nova from midnight until 10 a.m. I mean, look at how different the curve is for that day. Then there was a peak from 10 to 12, and then looks like everybody went to sleep for a couple hours. But this kind of information is available to a radio station 24 hours after it happens. So you can understand exactly what your audience engagement was, and you can map this up against your playout system's program schedule and see how your programming is actually performing. If you go to the next slide, you can see a similar pattern with WNEW, but very different. In this case, people drove home. Maybe we got home a little earlier than they did in Denmark. The morning drive audience was almost non-existent if you look at 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., but they peaked. The audience grew at, in the afternoon. So, guys, what is your reaction to this? Does this surprise you? Is it useful information? How do you think you would use this, for programming and promotions?
I can see that the Danes love to drink and they like to stay out late, so it doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, we did a big campaign also, do not drink and drive, and I almost feel I'm pleased about that because it looked like the campaign that we did, make sure you have a good night, but leave your car at home the next day, has paid off. So I'm thrilled about that, and I could probably take this data and go to one of my big sponsors next year and say, "Listen, what we've done." So yeah. I think it's great.
Yeah, you have a unique opportunity to sell the drive home and start the New Year's.
There's a really good question that's come through from Joao Correa.
Exactly.
Joe, DTS AutoStage, is it geo-blocked or is it open worldwide?
So it's open worldwide, and remember, it starts with broadcast radio. So what happens is the car tunes to local radio, and then it gets this whole enhanced experience. This is not like TuneIn. We are not an IP streaming platform. So there's a natural, call it geo-blocking is probably too strong a word, because we do have a lot of cross-border listening, especially in Europe. You have a lot of Italian stations that are listened to in Switzerland, for example, and French stations that cross-border. Even US and Canada, you have a lot of cross-border. So we don't geo-block the broadcast signal. Wherever that signal is available, that's what the user is presented. We do have a feature that allows drivers to switch to the stream if they drive out of coverage. And in that case, all we do is make the stream address available to the vehicle. If that stream is geo-blocked, for example, someone's in France listening to an Italian radio station, when they drive out of coverage, if the Italian broadcaster does in fact geo-block the stream, then that stream won't be available. But that's the only instance. This is really a broadcast first system.
Yeah, but the reality is, if they want to take it wherever they are in the world, if they want to bring DTS AutoStage over as part of their armory, they're welcome to do it. It doesn't matter. You don't currently have What are the restrictions? Is there a market that wouldn't be able to take full advantage of it right now because of X or Y missing in that market, Joe?
The only place we've encountered like an institutional or systemic challenge was actually in Japan. In Japan, they have some very unique licensing rules around music broadcast. Specifically, they have to have a physical copy of the music in order to program their radio stations. And as a result, that made the production and ingest of metadata a bit more challenging because they don't use a traditional playout system with digital platforms. But we were able to move through that. I can't think of any other
obstacle.
Yeah. And I'm hesitating a bit because China also has some unique restrictions about the data that can come out of a vehicle over a cellular network to a third party. So we do have like those systemic privacy issues. But no, as you saw from the map, we have cars literally in 144 countries that are listening to radio, and that radio experience is being enhanced by content that we deliver. So,
question from Bala Subramani in Malaysia. Advancements in voice recognition and interactive technologies. What strategies or innovations do you think will be crucial for ensuring a safe and efficient integration of audio features in connected dashboards, especially in the context of minimizing driver distraction?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously, what you see with a lot of the visualizations here can be considered, a bit of a distraction. So what we do first and foremost with all the visuals and the text is we tie it to the audio. So it has a contextual reinforcement to the audio. So it's not like an ad that's unrelated to audio that may pull your eyes away from the road. We're also harmonizing this with the vehicle, the ADAS systems, those platforms that are helping drivers manage their workload. So the displays will change based on the speed and engagement of other vehicle systems. But voice is critical. And if you think about voice as an enabling user interface, voice is 100% dependent on the metadata below the service that it is trying to help manage. So for example, when you're at home and you talk to Alexa and you say, order me a pizza. The only reason it can order you a pizza is because it knows what a pizza is. It knows who's delivering pizza in your area. And in most cases, you've set up an account. So all the metadata that we're delivering that's being presented visually on the screen is also available to voice interfaces. And we are working with Nuance and Amazon and a bunch of other voice platforms to create those linkages. So when you speak to the radio and you say, play me Nova, even if there's not a visual display for you to actually physically hit a button, the platform knows what Nova is, where it's located, and what it needs to do to tune to that radio station. So this is absolutely a complementary system to voice interfaces. Hopefully that answers the question.
Paula, let us know. I know Joao is very happy with the answer. I hope, Jose, you were happy with the answer around development on the broadcast side. If not, please, feel free to ask for clarification. And Bala, if you're happy with what Joe's just said, let us know as well. So the other, I guess as we getting close to rounding up, we want to know how this technology is going to evolve. You've said this is the first base, what we know now, what it's capable of now. But I'm sure there's a lot coming. And it could be pretty exciting for those that are watching. Maybe they're holding for the next phase. I don't know. But what is it? I mean, when we're online. Oh, before I ask that question, actually, let's park that question. The other question that's important, we must get to that one. But the other question that's important is for Joe and for Jim and Reggie, when you look at how you're rendering in a car today, do you think this gives you some kind of comfort because there's so much else available to the driver than there ever was before? So they can obviously listen to on-demand services. They can obviously go away from radio and listen to podcasts. They can listen to streaming services. Does this make you feel a bit better than you might have felt 3 years ago? And why?
Yeah, I mean, it's what listeners expect, right? Like to us, it's oh, this is so new and shiny, but that's just what the user expects. That's what they want to see. And the research we've done shows that the users want a better dashboard experience. They want to rely less on the phone. So this is exactly what the user is looking for.
What have you seen in Denmark and Norway? Any skepticism? Lots of
No,
enthusiasm? What do you see?
I think there's enthusiasm. I thought there's a lot of excitement about it. I mean, I call the in-car a little bit like DAB on steroids because it's got so many possibilities to do it. And when I spoke earlier about Norway, the one thing I didn't mention is actually Norway is probably one of the only countries also in the world that has not gone down in listeners in the last 5 years. It's actually gone up. So it just shows me that choice does work. But it's bringing a lot of young people in. I think you asked earlier, does it cost anything? It does cost anything, not so much for Joe's product, but you get a lot of people that really want to work with the metadata, get excited about the pictures. You have a whole social group that is really getting excited about it and want to be the best in the world. So, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves on trying to do things better. But I mean, that's what I'll call positive stress instead of negative. I think there's going to be great possibilities, and I don't think you should be afraid of it. You've got to embrace it, and you've got to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Have you had to retool your staffing as a result of bringing in this sort of data analytics? Have you had to bring in different types of skills as a result of that?
Yeah, we've had our social media group that's been very good on the social side. So for them to come in now and understand the whole metadata on the cars is taking some knowledge. It takes some say startup. Lucky enough, we're a big company, so we've got a lot of specialists in that. But it does. You have to think a little different.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, I mean, that's the payback is the value you're going to get from when you go into advertising agencies and market. Is there everybody's native to this sort of thing anyway? They're looking at data analytics all the time when they're buying digital media. So if they're not doing the same with radio, it would be very unusual. Andre Rivetta's got a question, Joe, before we get to the what does it look like tomorrow and the next day. How long will it take before automated systems with AI voices completely replace broadcasters' radio services? News, weather, traffic. And that's probably not just for you, Joe, but also Jim and Reggie. Yeah.
Yeah, I think AI is clearly a blessing and a curse and a reality that we're going to have to deal with. I know that there are significant actions being considered here in the States, specifically around AI-generated content and the public airwaves. There's a concern about, there's not a better term, but fake news. Who controls AI-generated content, who's responsible for it, and as the holder of an FCC license, are you able to use that, and what are the guidelines and principles to ensure that it's still a trusted voice and operating in the public's best interest? So I don't know that I have a specific answer. I think it's something that we are looking at very closely, because we have technology and services on the video side and on the music metadata side that are being used right now to train AI models. And we're trying to figure out what's the right strategy. Like, how do you embrace this? How do you push back against it? And it's evolving very quickly, and it's a huge challenge. Editorially, though, and I think from, a human perspective, I hope it's going to be a while before AI can truly replace a trusted local voice on radio. Someone who is reacting in real time to what's going on, what they're, what's trending in the news, what's important to the community. I'm not naive enough to say it will never happen, but I still think there's something about the human presenter and their ability to engage an audience that, at least for now, has not been replicated by technology.
Andrea, actually, you should tune in to Radio Week Thursday. day 4, because we're doing a full discussion for the entire hour on AI and understanding what the ethics are around it, what it means for the future of radio and broadcasting. So please do tune in on Thursday, because you can have a full hour just on that. Joe, let's talk now about phase 2, phase 3. What can radio broadcasters around the world look forward to in terms of what's going to happen to make them even stronger inside motor vehicles with your data analytics?
Yeah. Sure. If I can ask you to just pull up slide 18, I'll give you a glimpse into what's coming. And it's all around personalization and recommendations. What we have done on the, for those of you who don't know, Xperi merged with TiVo back in 2020. And TiVo has a long history and fantastic technology around personalization and recommendation for video programming. Since the merger and COVID, we've taken all of that learnings, all the intellectual property, all the techniques, the editorial and the curation team, and we've applied that to radio. And what we are doing is positioning our platform to keep people with broadcast radio and keep people with broadcast radio produced programming. So if you look at this display, it might be a little hard to see, but in the upper, in the row at the top of the screen, all the way to the right, you see a little icon that's more like this. That is an indication of what's coming with our recommendations platform. So the use case that Nissan has implemented is you have a driver, they have their presets, they have their listening habits, listening patterns. As they drive into a market where they may not know the stations, they can select this button more like this, and that will recommend radio stations that are both predictive and suggestive recommendations based on their listening behavior and their listening patterns. So the ability to almost predict and present to a driver radio content that they may not know exists and they may not know they even would enjoy is brand new for broadcast radio. We're doing this across the entire dial. So if you are on our system, if you've integrated your content and you're informing us of what you're playing over the air so that we can deliver that metadata, you will be included in this content recommendation service. The whole intent here is to, again, keep people with broadcast radio, and as they move to on-demand audio, present on-demand audio that is produced by the radio station, whether it's catch-up content or podcasts. So I think that is probably the most exciting area, and it's not 2 years away or 5 years away. It's literally available now. Mm-hmm. And because so many of these platforms are software upgradable, either over the air or at a dealer, an auto dealer, you will see these kinds of advanced features of AutoStage be applied to the majority of the vehicles that are already deployed on the road with AutoStage's first generation.
I want to ask you about personalization, but before we get there, and I'm talking about even for advertising, localization, etc., because you know where the cars are, but that's coming up. First, Boyd Leader's sent a question, and I think he's kind of anticipating that motor vehicle manufacturers, like they do with everything, are going to see this as an accessory that's worth charging for at some point. So have there been any discussions around them charging a subscription for this service to their their drivers, like they do with the other accessories?
Yeah, we absolutely anticipated that, and the answer is no. It's not allowed under the terms of our license agreement, and one of the driving reasons why it's not allowed, and you in Europe will all appreciate this, is we have public service broadcasters on our platform. You cannot charge an additional fee for accessing public service broadcast content. So in our early days of working, with the BBC and ARD and Radio France and Swedish radio, I could go down the list. We have most of the European public service broadcasters on our platform. That use case was specifically prohibited. What is interesting, and again, you've seen this in the video space, there's a lot of monetization opportunities around content discovery, content engagement that are very prevalent with platforms like Roku, for example. We are seeing opportunities like that begin to present itself around audio services in the car. And what's exciting to me about that personally is everyone in the ecosystem participates. There's an understanding that if an ecosystem unlocks new revenue opportunities, the content publisher, the content creator, and the platform owner all participate. So it's very possible that in the next 12 months, you as a broadcaster are going to see completely new revenue opportunities, not cost implications, but revenue opportunities around DTS AutoStage.
Fantastic. We are out of time. You've kind of covered this issue about how this is going to evolve, even around geolocated advertising, depending on where people are traveling, perhaps even get to a point where different cars get different advertising pushed to them. All of that possibly becomes realistic, depending on how technology evolves. This has been a great discussion. I hope that those of you who've watched have learned a hell of a lot about how the car is changing as a place where you get your entertainment. You always have had it. You're going to get a lot more now, but also the way it's presented. And if you run radio stations, that perhaps there isn't as much to fear as you might have thought 3 or 4 years ago. Those screens aren't your enemy anymore with a product like DTS, and I'm sure there'll be other products in future. It becomes a friend because you look like like you belong on that screen. And most importantly, I think it's the back end, the data analytics that's coming through that's going to help you in terms of both your revenue and your audience strategy. Pretty great. Lovely to hear it. Last comments. I know we're over time, but Jim, Reggie, Joe, we'll end with you, Joe. But any last comments for people that are watching that are still wondering whether they should go ahead with this? Let's start with you, Jim.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I mean, it's not going to go away, so you might as well embrace it right now. People that aren't embracing it are going to be left behind, and especially if you have a great brand already, take that brand, work on it, and then start finding out how you're going to do something for the young people. But it's not going away, so embrace it.
Thank you, Jim. Reggie?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, especially for you analytics insights folks. Get deeper into storytelling about who is listening and where and when. Definitely.
Brilliant. Final word, Joe.
Join us. It's the platform is deployed. It's we're adding more and more cars. It's free, and I think your listeners will be delighted with the user experience.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you for watching this edition of Radio Week. There's another one tomorrow at exactly the same time, 2:00 Central European time. We're talking about data security, cybersecurity, the fact that we're all digital companies now, even as we're radio stations, and how we need to protect our assets. That's tomorrow. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for this Xperi Radio Week.
Thank you.
I know.
Bye.